critics will notice in these peak hours, hey, you have power at this price and you're able to monetize it when there's volatility and power's at $5,000 a megawatt hour. But what they don't always appreciate is these hedges are a average of all power prices over the period. What that means is actually...
What's up, guys? Bang, bang. Today we've got Jason Less. Jason is the CEO of Riot Platforms. They're one of the largest miners in North America. They're a publicly traded company that is exclusively focused on mining as much Bitcoin as they possibly can. In this conversation, we talk about public policy, why politicians are becoming so interested in Bitcoin mining, what is going on with the halving, how the hardware updates are implementing across the industry, what to think about the rise of AI and the competition for power, how load balancing is working down in Texas, and much, much more. Jason is always at the forefront of thinking through many of these issues. He's built a very large and very interesting company, and so it's super exciting to talk to him. Here is my conversation with Jason Less. Jason, I thought a great place to start this conversation is with the halving. Obviously, it's a big moment in Bitcoin mining. There's a lot of, I think, FUD, and people are worried, kind of what happens there. But maybe you could tell us the halving occurred. What have you guys seen in your business? And are you doing anything different now that we're on the other side of it?
Well, what we've seen and all miners have seen is the worst mining economics in history. Hash price has reached all-time lows. Not unexpected, though. This is the second halving that Riot has gone through. We prepared for this. I think all miners were preparing for this in some way. It really came down to upgrading your fleet, get the more efficient equipment, make sure you have the low cost of power. Everyone leading up into this halving. And, it's not just leading up the months towards, it's years in advance. You're thinking, how can I make sure I have the most cost competitive equipment to withstand this period? I think if you look at historical halvings, which a lot of Bitcoiners do now as signals of how they think the price is going to perform, while past performance doesn't indicate future results, we've seen positive momentums in Bitcoin price in the 12, 18 months that follow halvings. May not necessarily happen. Like I said, past results don't dictate future results, but it's about, for many miners, I think, surviving these periods of constrained economics. So for Riot, one of our hallmarks of our strategy is getting a very low cost of power. We do that with our flexible power strategy. We've been upgrading our fleet and rapidly expanding over the past couple of years in preparation for this halving. And we've kept a strong balance sheet. We want to withstand the volatility and get to the long term. But it's a tough time for all miners. Right now, we're getting Q2 financial results have just started being released last week, and then through the next week or so. That's almost the first full quarter post-halving. The halving was April 19th, or April 20th. And so most of the quarter post-halving environment. And we're starting to see it's tough out there for a lot of these players, but I think everyone has a long-term vision at Bitcoin, at least here at Riot, and we made the right decisions, I think, to withstand and get to the gold in the future.
If I remember correctly, you guys reported somewhere around $70 million of revenue for Q2, which feels pretty strong, especially after kind of that halving. Help me understand, what should people be paying attention to over the next 12 to 18 months? You mentioned that kind of price historically has risen there. Are there certain things outside of just kind of hash price that you guys are paying attention to internally that may be able to give people an understanding of the mining economics?
Well, hash price is, of course, driven by really two main variables: the price of Bitcoin and how much competition there is around Bitcoin mining as measured through the difficulty. I think we're very bullish on the future of Bitcoin with the introduction of all the ETFs and these major financial firms getting behind Bitcoin now. The fact that Bitcoin has reached the level of national politics, major presidential candidates are now talking about Bitcoin. This all has us very bullish about the future of Bitcoin. Alongside that, we see mass grabs for access to power. That's what Bitcoin miners need to grow. If they want to build new facilities, they need access to power. With the renaissance that's going on with high performance computing and AI right now, they're not just Bitcoin miners and normal data centers competing for power capacity. There's a whole new industry that's competing for power capacity as well. So what we think is that will be a major constraint for Bitcoin mining operations going forward. Miners can buy new equipment, they can upgrade, and that increases their hash rate. But access to power is going to be the critical constraint going forward. So we think there's the potential, at least in the short term, for there to be a positive mismatch in between those two variables for large in-place Bitcoin miners, that as the price of Bitcoin goes up, the difficulty may not be able to increase as rapidly as it has in the past because of that constraint, their access to power. For us, we have one major advantage. We have three major advantages that we highlight: our strong balance sheet, our growing operations, and our low cost to mine. And that low cost to mine is the key advantage that we're trying to replicate over a large scale. Despite the depressed economics for the second quarter, we had a electricity cost per Bitcoin of about $15,000 net of our whole power strategy. So what our objective is going to be is replicating that on the widest scale going forward. And that's how we overcome the depressed mining economics and really position us up for that positive upside in the future.
Now, you mentioned that Bitcoin mining and politics are kind of on this crash course and may have even already crashed together. You were at the meeting with President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. I think you were also at the meeting in Nashville. Can you talk a little bit about the mining policy that is coming out of many of these kind of presidential campaigns, and maybe even Trump specifically, because it sounds like you've kind of had conversations with him about how he's looking at this industry?
This is a topic that I spend a lot of time on now. I spend a lot of time on it because this industry, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, has been under attack for the last few years here. Really ramped up, I would say, in 2022. We have seen a onslaught of hostility from the current administration. And I cannot even remember the whole list off the top of my head. This administration has been pushing against self-custody. There have been changes to longstanding policy where now they're going after wallet developers. There's been multiple proposed tax, 30% excise tax on Bitcoin mining, which would effectively ban Bitcoin mining in the United States. We've seen what can really best be characterized as Operation Choke Point 2.0, where banking regulators have pressured banks not to do business with Bitcoin-related companies. The Energy Department has been attempting to extract confidential information from Bitcoin miners on an emergency basis, and then develop a public registry of Bitcoin miners with their proprietary information publicly disclosed. By the way, Riot and other miners sued the Energy Department over that, and we were successful. So there's been a lot going on. So in order for us to protect our business and protect the prosperity of this industry in the United States, Bitcoin miners have had to take action. All Bitcoin companies, I should say, have had to take action. What that has really looked like is a lot of education, a lot of meetings on Capitol Hill talking to lawmakers. The good news is this is an issue where there is a lot of support. There's more support, I should say, than you would believe. I don't know if we're necessarily at a lot of support yet, but there's more than you would believe. And there's a good amount of bipartisanship in here starting. There are both Republicans and Democrats that see this as a key issue. And the industry is very fortunate to have the key allies that it does in Congress pushing this forward on both sides of the aisle. But the fact is, this administration has been extremely hostile towards Bitcoin. And when you think about a politician's objectives, there is really no upside to being anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto, which is confusing to why some have chose to make their identity around it. It's talking about specifically Senator Warren building an anti-crypto army and then using her influence within the administration to affect that campaign. There isn't a contingent of voters who are anti-Bitcoin that are looking to elect politicians to take down this industry. I mean, there may be some, but they're not very meaningful. On the other hand, you have some 50 million Americans that own or have owned crypto. You have about 1 in 3 voters in this year's election that's saying crypto is an important issue for them. So what we have been trying to communicate is this is an easy issue and it should be a universal one. This isn't an issue that has years of entrenched policy, like, how people view tax policy or certain social issues or, decades of stuff to unwind. It's a new issue, and it's an industry that really doesn't need the government in order to be successful. Really what the industry has asked for is the rules of the road and not to be singled out, not to be singled out amongst other industries and attacked for no other reason than what we do. So it's an industry, it's a very interesting issue for politicians because there are all these voters that care so much about it. And there's ultimately not that much action that's really being asked for. As an industry, we are simply asking, do not attack us. Do not treat us different than other companies. Allow this industry to use the momentum it has to thrive. Bitcoin will be successful no matter what, in my opinion, but the business environment is going to be dictated by politics. So it could be a rough road to a Bitcoin future, or it could be a more pleasant one. And we're trying to push for a more pleasant one. So finally, getting to the core of your question about Trump, I just wanted to have that backdrop is, we and others have published a good amount of op-eds talking about this as a campaign issue and talking about the value of the Trump campaign embracing Bitcoin because of how important of an issue this is to so many voters and the hostility that we face from this current administration. There's been a lot of behind the scenes to work, but that meeting in Mar-a-Lago was very pivotal. It was an opportunity for industry leaders to sit around the table with President Trump, talk about what's going on, ask questions and answer questions. And I think that was a very productive meeting because the next time we all got together was in Nashville, where President Trump made what I believe was a very positive speech for this industry. I think that was a huge milestone for Bitcoin, that no matter what you think of him, a major presidential candidate came to the leading #1 Bitcoin event of the year and talked about Bitcoin and the values that Bitcoin brings, and his campaign's intention to be supportive of this industry and their intention to make the United States a continued leader in this industry. That is very bullish for me. We're very excited about that. We care about promoting pro-Bitcoin candidates, and it's really a bit of political game theory that we're trying to get out here, because as politicians express a pro-Bitcoin view, that puts pressure on their opponents to also have a pro-Bitcoin view. And we've already seen that, right? From Trump after speaking at Nashville, we've seen rumblings of the Harris campaign trying to get up to speed on this issue. Democrats writing to their party saying, hey, we need to turn around on this issue. We're losing a lot of ground. And them kind of trying to get back up on the same stage of where now Trump has presented himself. So I think this is very positive for the industry. Once again, a lot of people say Bitcoin shouldn't rely on elected officials, shouldn't rely on politicians, and they're absolutely right. Bitcoin, as designed, I believe will be successful over the long term, no matter what. But as business operators in the United States, as users of Bitcoin, developers, we are in a very tough environment right now. And it's very important that this hostility ends so the United States can continue its positive trajectory and not get on a bumpy one.
What do you expect kind of a pro-Bitcoin president to be able to do? Obviously, we saw Trump kind of say, I think, all the right things that people wanted to hear at the Bitcoin conference. But for the mining business in particular, it sounds like there's one kind of talk track, if you will, that's, hey, we just want people not to be abrasive to us. But are there specific things that the president could do to help the mining industry? Today's episode is brought to you by Meanwhile. Meanwhile is the world's first licensed and regulated life insurance company built for the Bitcoin economy. Operating on the Bitcoin standard, they do everything in Bitcoin. You pay in Bitcoin. They pay claims to your family in Bitcoin. You take out policy loans entirely in Bitcoin when you need liquidity. Meanwhile, Bitcoin life insurance has redefined what it means to hodl. Protect your family from life's uncertainty in a broken financial system. Build intergenerational Bitcoin wealth while the cost of living skyrockets in dollar terms. Get all the tax and legal benefits of life insurance now in Bitcoin. They are actively binding policies today. Whether you are a long-term Bitcoiner or are just considering it for the first time, a Bitcoin whole life policy could make sense for your wealth plan. Visit their website, meanwhile.bm, to join the waitlist and to learn more about the world's first Bitcoin life insurer. Again, that's meanwhile.bm. Go check them out today.
Well, I mean, that brings up a good topic. A lot of people have asked me coming out of these meetings, hey, do you think Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do? Can we trust that President Trump would follow through with what he's saying? Listen, all we're asking for, as you kind of just summarized again, Anthony, is we are just asking not to be singled out and attacked. We want to be treated like everyone else. So ultimately, we don't need the president to do anything. In contrast to the current administration that is very hostile to this industry. And I have a lot of concerns that is going to continue. So what I need a president to do is ultimately nothing. Now, there are some positive things that they could do as well. One of the things that President Trump highlighted in his speech is the concept of creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which pairs with the legislation that Senator Lummis, a huge champion of Bitcoin from Wyoming, introduced following his speech. So that could be positive, I believe, for more supply to be taken off the table and to initiate potentially be nation state game theory with holding Bitcoin. There are some tax benefits as well. I think there are some certain unfair ways that Bitcoin miners or Bitcoiners are unfairly impacted by tax policy. Now, that's not something the president does as by himself unilaterally. That's something that's done in conjunction, in hand with Congress. But there are some positive things that we could do. But ultimately, the objective is to not have a hostile administration. So I'm very encouraged by the statements that President Trump has made, and I believe we would not have that hostile administration with him in the White House.
He made a couple of comments that I found very interesting. One of them was something to the effect of like, hey, I want to mine all of the Bitcoin in America, or, make Bitcoin made in America. I think today that there's about 35-ish% of all mining already happens in America. I think maybe around 10% or so is in the state of Texas alone. What is there a threshold that you think is appropriate? Should we try to get to 40, 50+% hash rate in the US? Is it possible? How do you think about kind of this idea of the US leading versus is there some threshold where you say actually we shouldn't go beyond this because we want this decentralized network from a geography standpoint?
Ultimately, it's all outside of our control, right? Bitcoin miners are growing all over the globe, and if the market incentive is there, we're going to see hash rate being deployed wherever it's going to be accretive to those operators. So when President Trump made those statements, that was very obviously, as a Bitcoin miner, I was very excited about that. I couldn't imagine 10 years ago, 11 years ago, someone telling me not only would a major presidential candidate be talking positively about Bitcoin, they would be talking about something even more niche in most people's mind, Bitcoin mining. So that was quite a sight for me to see. I think this is the type of thing where, like many industries, we want the United States to be the leader. Is the United States going to have 100% of the hash rate? That is impossible. It's never going to happen. There's competition globally for Bitcoin. I think we get to ourselves to a good place by striving to be number one, just like we would strive to be number one in other sectors, in other pockets of the Bitcoin industry. So much of what propels this industry is in the United States. So many users, so many businesses. To me, it makes sense that the United States is a leader in all these other components of the ecosystem, that they're the leader in Bitcoin mining as well. What that number is, I don't know. I am not concerned about one country necessarily having too much hash rate. China had 70+% of the network hash rate at some point. What happened from that? I think Bitcoin was designed to resist any type of attacks that people might be concerned around that. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is important and it's valuable because it utilizes proof of work. Proof of work utilizes energy. Energy is a scarce resource that cannot be printed, fabricated, or stolen. So if you think a country is going to harness all of that electricity just to attack Bitcoin, well, I believe I'm paraphrasing Satoshi's quote, but at that point, if they were going to devote all those resources to be hostile, at that point, they would realize it's better off just to utilize the resources for the benefit of Bitcoin.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I saw your one tweet. You said, the United States is Bitcoin country, which I think there is kind of this sense throughout the industry. Hey, maybe there are politicians. And I would actually argue, I think Republicans have done a great job of kind of positioning themselves as the pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto kind of side of the aisle. But there are other politicians on the Democratic side who are saying, hey, hold on a second. We don't want to just cede this point to kind of our, political rivals. We want this to be a bipartisan thing. And if they're going to embrace it, we better embrace it too. And so I think if I'm kind of reading into your comments here, your expectation is that over time, it will become that bipartisan issue that kind of has full support. It just may take some time and be a little bit of bumpy between where we are now to, that point. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right. I would say at this point, it's more Republicans than Democrats are supporting it. That doesn't mean that all Republicans are supportive. That doesn't mean that all Democrats are negative. We have some amazing allies from the Democratic side. Senator Gillibrand, Congressman Nickel, Congressman Khanna has been talking a lot about this. Congressman Torres. There's a number of allies on the Democrat side. And, recently you look at minds being changed. There was a Republican co-sponsor to Senator Warren's bill, which was a roundabout effective ban on Bitcoin, or at least crippling the industry in the United States. The Republican Senator Marshall was a co-sponsor. And after seeing the response, he actually just recently withdrew his co-sponsorship. So positive momentum we're seeing here. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is a tool. Whether you think about it as a store of value or a medium of exchange, using the internet isn't a partisan issue. Having a bank account, investing in stocks, investing in gold, these things aren't partisan issues. These are just things that people do. And that's what both sides of the aisle are eventually going to get to. There is no electoral upside to being anti-Bitcoin. There is only electoral downside. Don't cede this issue to your opponent. Be a supporter of the industry.
Now, one of the interesting things is that you all recently pulled off an acquisition of block mining, and it seems like you are one of a couple of players who are trying to consolidate the industry to some degree. Talk about the block mining acquisition in particular, and then is this something that you all will continue to go look for as these M&A opportunities, or how do you kind of see that consolidation playing out in the coming months?
Yeah, so Riot's right now overall company objective is to reach 100 exahash. We have a lot of capacity. I'd venture to say Riot has the biggest organic development pipeline within the industry, but we are out there trying to find additional capacity as well to support our growth plans. We're looking at areas that are friendly to Bitcoin mining and have cheap energy prices so we can continue to be a low-cost producer in Bitcoin mining. And of course, we're looking for companies that have very strong, proven teams operating them. And that's what we saw with block mining. They operate in Kentucky. Kentucky is a very Bitcoin-friendly state and is a very Bitcoin mining-friendly state. So while we have this big organic growth pipeline, we are out there looking for other avenues for growth. I'm very proud to say I think Riot has the number one corporate development team in the Bitcoin mining space. We have a very experienced team from different backgrounds, but all experienced in doing transactions and strong believers in the space. They're out there looking at different deals all the time. And with the team that we built up, we're able to dive into these in a lot of detail. And of course, most of them are not ones that we pursue. When we find these really valuable opportunities like Block, we're aggressive about getting them done. Block has a fantastic team. They fit our culture very well. So now, while we have this huge organic growth pipeline in Texas, where we are building out our Corsicana facility to 1 gigawatt, which should be the biggest facility or any data center, bigger than any data center in the world when completed. Now we have a team independently growing out in another jurisdiction in Kentucky as well. They have a growth pipeline of about getting to 300 megawatts. So now with the corporate backing of Riot, they're able to more aggressively go after their goals. Our hope is to continue to find more opportunities like this, find different jurisdictions that we are friendly to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining with low energy prices that we can operate in. We believe Bitcoin mining has a very positive relationship with the energy grid where it exists. So we want to continue replicating that strategy and scaling up as wide as possible.
Now, talk to me about kind of the hardware. One of the things that I think a lot of people are paying attention to is obviously energy. You need that energy in order to be able to participate. But the hardware has historically been something that maybe is a little bit unpredictable in terms of upgrades there. But also people may not realize how much miners need to think through, how much kind of life do you get out of the hardware you currently have? You have to kind of demand plan into the future. There's deposits. There's kind of, an entire business practice there. And so any updates on kind of what you guys are doing on that front or things maybe that you think people would find interesting? Today's episode is brought to you by iTrustCapital. Are you buying crypto on an exchange because you're excited about the bull run? Well, I hope you're reporting your crypto gains to the IRS because they want you to pay your taxes. That's right. When you buy and sell crypto on an exchange, you need to pay the government taxes when you make profits. That sounds pretty taxing. There's another way you can buy and sell crypto without worrying about taxes. At iTrustCapital, you can buy and sell crypto inside of a tax-advantaged crypto IRA. Crypto IRAs are retirement accounts that work similarly to an exchange, but with tax benefits. Let me give you an example. If you can buy and sell crypto on an exchange and you make a $20,000 profit, you have to pay the government taxes. However, if you do the same thing in your Roth IRA and you make a $20,000 profit, you don't need to pay any taxes. That's right. You get to keep all the profits and not have to pay taxes because it's in a tax-advantaged account. So opening a tax-advantaged IRA at iTrustCapital only takes a few minutes. You have 24/7 access to the markets with some of the lowest fees in the industry. The bull run has begun, and people are starting to see their accounts go up. So start taking advantage of tax benefits with an IRA at iTrustCapital. You can start maximizing your crypto investment today. Go to iTrustCapital.com. That's iTrustCapital.com.
I think the hardware industry has changed dramatically over the past 4 years since the last halving. If you go back 4 years, Bitmain was the predominant manufacturer with some MicroBT and Canaan behind them. Bitmain is still the dominant manufacturer today, but there are more and more players that are entering the space, and we're seeing a lot more competition. The hardware is improving. We're not seeing those huge absolute jumps in hardware efficiency, improvements in hardware efficiency like we did, in 2014, 2015. But we're still making strides. So miners are incentivized to continue upgrading to make sure they have an efficient, low-cost fleet. When we look at the lifespan for miners, there's kind of two figures you have to think about. There's the accounting, what are the auditors making you put down as a useful life that's going to guide your depreciation schedule? But also, what do you think your economic and operational life is going to be? For us, we believe with our low cost of power, we can keep machines competitive for quite some time. Could be 5, 6, 7 years. So well beyond what our depreciation schedule actually ends up being. The real question then is, how can you extend the operational life of the machine to make sure it continues to operate through that full economic opportunity lifespan? One of the things that Riot has led the industry on aggressively pursuing is utilizing immersion cooling. This was a very niche thing a few years ago. Riot has built the largest deployments of immersion cooling. For those who don't know, immersion cooling is a dielectric fluid that does not conduct electricity, so you can submerge electronics in it. And by cooling that fluid, you can keep your machines operating at a cooler temperature than you may otherwise be able to do just in ambient air. We operate in Texas. It gets very hot. It's over 100 degrees by a good margin every day down here in August. So that is a big challenge for Bitcoin miners. So by utilizing this immersion cooling, we believe we can improve our overall operating uptime, and more importantly, we think extending the useful life of these machines. They're operating at a more constant, stable temperature, not subject to being beaten down by the hot air as much. And hopefully, we believe that requires less repair and maintenance over time and a longer useful life of the machine. So now we're actually seeing miners miner manufacturers developing hardware that's purpose-built for immersion cooling. When we first started doing immersion cooling, we'd have to take apart the machines, remove the fans, do some tweaks, and then put them in the fluid. In our new facility in Corsicana, we have been buying purpose-built immersion miners from a company called MicroBT, which is about second place to Bitmain in market share. And actually really exciting for us is MicroBT is manufacturing these machines right here in the United States. So we see some diversification for our the production of hardware, and we're able, instead of chartering huge jets to send these miners from Southeast Asia over to the United States, they're on a truck from Pennsylvania down to our facility in Texas. So it's very exciting how this hardware industry has evolved. And I think with all the players entering it, we're going to continue to see more interesting things happen over the coming years.
Now, speaking of mining and kind of power, one of the coolest, I think, developments has been this kind of contribution to load balancing on electrical grids, specifically in Texas. We've seen this. It, I think, has really silenced some of the critics when it comes to the miners taking so much energy from these grids. But recently, there has been a number of kind of new critics who are saying, no, wait a second, these miners are, quote, gaming the system, is one of the critiques that I saw. And what they're basically saying is, look, they're able to make more money by doing this. And so it's not quite what, they promised. How do you think about those critiques? Are miners gaming the system? And is it a net positive, kind of moving forward?
It's absolutely a net positive. Just on its basis, Bitcoin miners are an industrial user of power that are flexible. There aren't other industrial uses of power, large-scale uses of power that have those flexible properties. Bitcoin blocks come every 10 minutes. That means a miner's work is, on average, at worst, only 10 minutes old. So we can shut off at different times and not lost the work that we've done in the past. We've already mined that Bitcoin. So when you think about an energy grid, there's a constant challenge to match supply and demand. You really have to build a grid out to support peak demand. We live in a modern, first world country. We need energy all the time. It's not acceptable to have energy outages at different time. We have critical infrastructure that always needs power. So you build an energy grid, you have to build it out to accommodate, have enough generation and transmission to meet peak power. But those are only a few % of the hours of the year. The fact is, most of the time, a grid's capacity is not utilized. That is a strain for generation developers. So when you think about the energy challenges that we're facing as a nation, the massive growth in energy demand and the generation needed to match that demand, what you actually need are flexible users of power like Bitcoin miners that will buy power in those off-peak times and help improve the financial profile of those projects, and then have the flexibility to shut off during those peak times. And that capacity, which might not have been that generation capacity, which may have been uneconomical at off-peak, is now able to provide power to all other consumers and businesses at on-peak. That's very important. So one of the things that Riot has done, which is a little unique, not done at a wide scale in this industry, is we have entered into various power hedges. These are just financial instruments where we put up financial resources. We essentially took a view on the price of power over the term of these hedges. In our case, they varied between 7 to 10 years when they were executed. And we essentially own that power. Now, first off, that has a positive impact just in its front. We are a predictable buyer of power. Generators who are looking to hedge out their exposure need someone on the other end of that transaction who's going to buy them. In this case, that was Riot, who bought these hedges over these long periods. So with these hedges, we are able to have the security to continue operating in those off-peak times, and then we can make that capacity available. So this is a good financial incentive for generators to continue to come in the market. If they know there's a buyer on the other side, then they know that there is a greater certainty in their economics. We took a financial risk to do that. We have an ongoing financial risk with those instruments. We are subject to collateral requirements that move around pretty significantly. And we have to have a strong balance sheet to post the tens of millions of dollars in potential collateral to handle those swings. So it is something that they notice in these peak hours. Critics will notice in these peak hours, hey, you have power at this price and you're able to monetize it when there's volatility and power's at $5,000 a megawatt hour. But what they don't always appreciate is these hedges are a average of all power prices over the period. What that means is actually in off-peak times, we are oftentimes buying power higher than the market price. But we own that since that price is an average, we still own it at those on-peak hours that we're able to monetize. The effect of this is two things.
Today's episode is brought to you by iTrustCapital.
When power
Are
is
you
in high
buying
demand,
crypto on an exchange because you're excited about
which
the
is
bull
a downward
run?
pressure on the price.
I hope you're reporting your crypto gains to the IRS
any market,
because they want you to pay your taxes.
The other
That's
thing
right.
we're able
When you buy and
to
sell
do
crypto on an
with
exchange,
these hedges
you need to pay the
is
government
participate in
taxes when you
something
make
called
profits.
ancillary services.
That sounds
Ancillary services are where grid operators.
There's another way you can buy and sell crypto without worrying about taxes. At iTrustCapital, you can buy and sell crypto inside of a tax-advantaged crypto IRA.
Grid operators,
Crypto IRAs IRAs are retirement accounts that work similarly to an exchange, but with tax benefits. Let me give you an example.
Will tell you
if you can buy and sell crypto on an exchange and you make a $20,000 profit,
just as well as they
you have to pay the government taxes.
Generation.
However, if you do the same thing in your Roth IRA and you make a $20,000 profit, you don't need to pay any taxes. That's right. You get to keep all the profits and not have to pay taxes because it's in a tax-advantaged account. So opening a tax-advantaged IRA at iTrustCapital only takes a few minutes. You have 24/7 access to the markets with some of the lowest fees in the industry. The bull run has begun, and people are starting to see their accounts go up. So start taking advantage of tax benefits with an IRA at iTrustCapital. You can start maximizing your crypto investments today. Go to iTrustCapital.com. That's iTrustCapital.com.
Especially during those off-peak hours where they may be losing money. It gives us the opportunity to participate in ancillary services and give the grid operator control of that load to achieve grid stability. For us, the challenge here is just education. These are nuanced issues. Hey, just as you and I struggle to often explain Bitcoin to people, these dynamics of an energy market, they are very challenging as well. We're out there in the field all the time, putting together material, meeting with people, and I'm positive with the continued investment at that detractors and critics are going to see the light on Bitcoin mining.
My last question for you is the rise of kind of AI and the data centers. We've seen some of the publicly traded miners say, hey, look, actually, we're high performance compute, platforms, and we're going to do mining, plus we're going to do AI and kind of traditional compute. Some other miners have said, look, we're just going to do Bitcoin mining. That's our core focus. And then there's kind of this market dynamic where now you've got even more people showing up for power who, may not want it for Bitcoin mining. They want it for just the data center purposes. How have you seen the rise of AI and this kind of high performance compute affect Bitcoin mining as an industry, both kind of your competitors, but also maybe some of the sites that you guys would want to select or kind of consume power at?
It's certainly been one of the main topics of discussion in our industry this year. First off, like we highlighted earlier, now we are competing against more buyers of power. We're competing against those other types of loads that are looking for power capacity where it exists. So that, in effect, should reduce the supply of, in theory, reduce the supply of power capacity that's available for growth in all these applications. We believe Bitcoin miners have a better story, though, with the flexible property that we're just talking about. They help grid stability. So I think they have a more persuasive argument for getting interconnections approved by grid operators, but we're competing together nonetheless. There have been some Bitcoin miners out there, Core Scientific in particular, that have struck very impressive deals with AI operators. So they're converting some of their infrastructure, utilizing some of their power capacity to provide these AI-focused data centers for a specific client. The economics on those appear very interesting. The result of that deal has got a lot of other Bitcoin miners interested in it. And it almost seems now that there's a positive share price impact for those miners who are expressing an interest in this space and exploring it. For us, we fall under the bucket of the pure play Bitcoin miners that you mentioned. We have a Bitcoin culture that is ingrained in us here. We're here because of Bitcoin. We want all the upside for Bitcoin that we possibly can get. Our access to power is a valuable thing. There's only a limited amount of it, and we want to make sure we can utilize all of that so we're in position to get all the upside that we can for Bitcoin because, we believe in Bitcoin. A lot of miners are taking different views, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone has a different business strategy. Everyone has different things they want to focus on. I think this is an example of different participants in the industry that, just have a mix of different strategies. We're a Bitcoin company, and we're going to remain focused on Bitcoin mining.
Jason, where can we send people to find you on the internet or find out more about the business?
Well, first, check out our website, riotplatforms.com. We're continuing to put more information there about our operations, and we're actually starting to introduce more educational material about some of the things that you and I just talked about, Bitcoin mining's relationship with energy grids. You should definitely follow us on Twitter at Riot Platforms. We put out a lot of good videos all the time. Myself, I'm at JasonLess _. Couldn't get that at JasonLess without the underscore yet, but you follow me on Twitter as well.
We got to go find who's got that one and say, hey, man, come on, give it up.
This guy, and he's not giving it up.
All right, Jason, I appreciate it very much. And we definitely do this again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony.